Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, during her first New Year's press conference, President Park lays out a 3-year economic plan, which includes reforming debt-ridden public institutions and striking a balance between domestic demand and investment. Following President Park's proposal to hold reunions of separated Korean families during the Lunar New Year holiday, Seoul suggests the two Koreas meet for working-level discussions on the event this Friday. Plus, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, while pledging to strengthen his country's military role in the region, calls for summits with the leaders of Korea and China. Seoul and Beijing say that's not going to happen unless Tokyo faces up to its wartime aggressions. Daybreak begins now.
You're watching Daybreak on Tuesday, January 7th. I'm Chae Yusan in Seoul. We begin with President Park Geun-hye's New Year's press conference. In an 80-minute speech, followed by a Q&A session, Park outlined her policy goals for 2014, promising to inject fresh vitality into the economy and seek a new framework of dialogue with North Korea. Our presidential correspondent Eoh Jin-joo has the details.
Revitalizing the economy and laying the foundation for a peaceful reunification of the two Koreas will be the focus of President Park's activities in the year 2014. During a New Year's press conference on Monday, the Korean president presented a 3-year plan for economic reform.
저는 올해 국민 여러분이 성과를 피부로 느낄 수 있도록 우리 경제의 혁신과 재도약을 위한 경제 혁신 3개년 계획을 세우고 이것을 성공적으로 이끌어서 국민 행복 시대를 열어가겠습니다.
The president pledged to normalize abnormal practices in society and set up the structure for a strong economy, starting with reforms in the public sector and continue her push for a creative economy. She also vowed to create an economy that balances domestic demand and exports by supporting SMEs and fostering the 5 major service industries, the sectors of health, education, tourism, finance, and software. With the two Koreas having been divided for nearly 70 years now, North Korea will also remain a top priority for the Park administration. President Park stressed that it is now time to prepare for a reunified Korea, breaking away from the threats of war and nuclear weapons. She also proposed holding a round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War around the Lunar New Year holiday, which falls in the last week of January.
이번에 설을 맞아 지난 60년을 기다려온 연로하신 이산 가족들이 상봉하도록 해서 마음의 상처가 치유될 수 있도록 해주기를 바랍니다. 북한이 이산 가족 상봉으로 첫 단추를 잘 풀어서 남북 관계에 새로운 계기를 만들었으면 합니다.
On the domestic front, President Park denied rumors that there will be a cabinet reshuffle in the near future and refused to give a clear answer on her stance towards the opposition party's demand for an independent council probe into the intelligence agency's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election. The president also addressed the criticism that she hasn't been a good communicator during her first year in office, but many analysts weren't satisfied with her response. They say it shows that her concept of good communication is very different from that of the general public and opposition groups. Eoh Jin-joo, Arirang News.
While surveys show the South Korean public may be at a standstill on the immensely complex issue of reunification, President Park has singled it out as one of her core missions during her term. Han Da looks into the detailed steps also announced in the New Year's press conference on Monday to realize that goal.
지금 국민들 중에는 이 통일 비용이 너무 많이 들지 않겠느냐. 그래서 굳이 통일을 할 필요가 있겠는가 하고 생각하는 그런 분들도 계시는 것으로 압니다. 그러나 저는 한마디로 통일은 대박이다. 이렇게 생각을 합니다.
President Park Geun-hye, stressing that a reunification of the two Koreas would bring about enormous benefits to the nation, laid out a three-pronged plan to that end on Monday. The first step, she said, is bringing peace to the peninsula. In order to do that, she called on Seoul to maintain tight national security so that citizens can carry on with their daily lives without fear, and urged Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear program.
두 번째로는 그 대북 인도적 지원을 강화를 하고 그거를 통해서 또 남북 주민 간의 동질성 회복도 좀 더 이렇게 이루어질 수 있도록 노력을 하려고 합니다.
President Park also mentioned the need to take good care of North Korean defectors living in the South, as they play an important role in ending the division of the two Koreas. Third, the president said she will work to create a global consensus on the need for a reunified Korea. Saying she had already discussed the matter frankly with the leaders of China and Russia, President Park plans to move forward with such efforts this year. In regards to the seemingly unstable situation in the communist state, President Park said the government will prepare for any and all scenarios, as it's risky to make premature assumptions about the North's internal affairs. President Park also stated that she's willing to hold summit talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at any time, but only when the talks can bring about a substantial outcome in bringing peace to the peninsula. 한다은, Arirang News.
Following President Park's proposal for an inter-Korean family reunion, Seoul has proposed to Pyongyang a fresh round of talks this week to discuss resuming the meetings for families separated since the Korean War. South Korea's unification ministry says Seoul's Red Cross sent a message to the North on Monday, suggesting a working-level meeting on Friday at the Truce village of Panmunjom. The two Koreas had agreed to hold the humanitarian event in September of last year, but Pyongyang unilaterally called off the plans at the last minute. Earlier on Monday, Pyongyang took aim at President Park's North Korea policy, saying an overhaul is needed if inter-Korean relations are to improve anytime soon. The North's state-run Nodong Shinmun newspaper said President Park's emphasis on sticking to her principles was the main stumbling block to bettering cross-border relations, as it encourages competition between the two Koreas. President Park says North Korea can't win concessions by making threats or staging provocations, and that any progress in inter-Korean relations has to be based on mutual trust. As for Seoul's heightened security measures against possible threats, the newspaper said it was shameful the South would rest the fate of the two Koreas in the hands of a foreign power, referring to the U.S. military presence on the peninsula. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says he wants to meet with the leaders of Korea and China to explain why he visited the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine late last month. Abe said Monday that dialogue between the three Northeast Asian neighbors is important for the peace and security in Northeast Asia. He said he also wanted to explain his reasons for wanting to amend Japan's pacifist constitution imposed after the Second World War. Beijing swiftly rejected Abe's overtures. A foreign ministry spokesperson said his visit to the Yasukuni Shrine disregarded the Chinese people. While Seoul hasn't yet commented on Abe's latest remarks, President Park, during her press conference on Monday, had criticized Abe's Yasukuni visit. Seoul and Washington will resume negotiations on Tuesday to revise their civilian nuclear accord. Korea's chief negotiators ambassador Bang No-byuk will meet his U.S. counterpart, Thomas Countryman, in Korea's central city of Daejeon for the two-day talks. Seoul is pushing Washington to allow it to enrich its own uranium and reprocess spent nuclear fuel to meet growing energy needs. But the U.S. is reluctant to agree to the request due to concerns about proliferation. The upcoming meeting is the 9th round of talks between Seoul and Washington on the matter. Political wrangling at the National Assembly over the past year has done more than frustrate the Korean public. It's made this parliament one of the least productive in more than a decade. Lawmakers have submitted more than 8,500 bills since the current 19th National Assembly began work in 2012. This is a 23% increase from the previous assembly and a record high in Korean parliamentary history. But this assembly passed just over 10% of the bills in its first year, the lowest rate since the 16th assembly, which began its term in June of 2000. The passage rate back then was about 40%. The National Assembly Secretariat says the prolonged deadlock between rival parties and the subsequent lack of time for deliberation are to blame for the low rate. Korea's foreign exchange reserves rose to a record high for a sixth straight month in December. The Bank of Korea says foreign reserves held by Asia's fourth largest economy stood at over $346 billion, up nearly $1.5 billion from a month earlier. The central bank attributed the rise to a weak U.S. dollar, which boosted the dollar conversion value of non-dollar assets. The euro strengthened 1.4% against the greenback as of the end of last month, while the British pound gained nearly 1% to the dollar.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye, given the current circumstances,
On your way to work or at home,
Defense Ministry, the legislature will convene a
tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinsoo said Tuesday. With its own economic concerns rising from the weeks-long conflict in neighboring South Sudan, Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir met with his South Sudanese counterpart in the South Sudanese city of Juba on Monday. Sudanese officials say the two leaders began talks on deploying joint forces to the oil-rich regions in South Sudan, much of which have been seized by rebels loyal to former South Sudanese Vice President Riek Machar. While the southern state claimed most of the region's oil fields after the decades-long Sudanese civil war, it uses pipelines in the north to export oil. The near-month-long conflict between factions of President Salva Kiir and his former deputy has left at least 1,000 people dead and displaced hundreds of thousands of others. The Iraqi Prime Minister is calling on residents of the embattled city of Fallujah to expel insurgents linked to al-Qaeda who have taken control there. In a statement read on state television on Monday, Nouri al-Maliki urged Iraqis to help the government and the military fight terrorists to avoid an all-out battle. The message came as hundreds of people fled Fallujah, located close to the capital, Baghdad, as government forces have been bombarding the area in an attempt to recapture the city. Al-Qaeda-linked insurgents fighting in neighboring Syria took over parts of Iraq's Anbar province last week. On the heels of a massive snowstorm in the U.S., large parts of the U.S. is prepared for a life-threatening cold wave that is forecast to send temperatures plummeting to their lowest in 20 years. Connie Lee has the details.
After being hit by a blizzard at the start of the new year, people in the Midwest and Northeast United States are now bracing for another blast of dangerous wintry weather. This time, a record-breaking one. The National Weather Service warned Sunday that much of the U.S. will see temperatures that will be the coldest on record in almost 20 years. In a statement, the service said that it may feel as cold as -50 to -60 degrees Fahrenheit, or that's -45 to -51 Celsius on Sunday night over sections of the north-central states. Under these conditions, forecasters warn that frostbite can occur on exposed skin within 5 minutes. The freezing cold temperatures are the result of what's called a polar vortex, an Arctic cold front that is set to descend over much of the U.S. By Wednesday, forecasters say nearly half the nation will be shivering in below freezing temperatures. Officials in several states have now asked residents to take extra precautions in the days ahead.
Cold really scares me, and it's such that we will have temperatures that are potentially deadly or certainly life-altering temperatures right now, and we have to be very, very careful with that.
The state of Minnesota ordered all public schools to be closed on Monday ahead of the cold snap, and shoppers in other Midwest states empty shelves at stores to stock up on supplies. The latest winter storm comes after a massive wintry weather system hit the Midwest and Northeast a day after New Year's. The storm killed at least a dozen people, grounded more than 6,000 flights, and forced schools and government offices to close. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Now, for those of us who reach for an alcoholic beverage or two every now and again, a recent Korean health study might give you pause. Stomach pains, gastric inflammation, and even ulcers are among the many afflictions for heavy drinkers, especially middle-aged men. Our Polly reports.
Year-end toasts paired with tapping glasses and plenty of cheers is a common sight these days in Korea. But waking up the next day can be a little rough.
If I drink and have 2 bottles of soju, the next day I feel so tired, so I just have some ramen noodles.
If my stomach is hurting a bit, I usually have cup noodles or foods with soup.
But for a growing number of heavy drinkers, these typical symptoms can quickly worsen to painful burning, vomiting, and sharp aches. Upon closer inspection, this particular patient is suffering from chronic gastritis, which includes inflammation and bleeding of the stomach.
Throughout this month, I was in the position where I was drinking almost every day. Then one day, I had a very serious pain in my stomach, so I quickly came to get an endoscopy exam.
According to Korea's Health Insurance Review and Assessment Service, 72% of alcohol-related gastritis patients last year were men, compared to only 28% of women. The health agency also found that men in their 50s were at the highest risk of developing the gastric disease. A large percentage of middle-aged Korean men said they took to drinking due to business reasons or high levels of stress. Without proper medical treatment and reduced alcohol intake, gastritis can potentially lead to ulcers and bacterial infections.
There are people who drink a lot of alcohol, then take hangover drinks. But the effect of these hangover drinks on alcohol toxicity is not fully known. Therefore, it's best to drink in moderate amounts over a reasonable amount of time.
It's recommended that you avoid eating spicy and salty foods when drinking, which could further irritate your stomach lining. And remember, moderation is the key to enjoying another year of health and prosperity. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the latest news on Shinsoo. And no, it's nothing to do with him on the baseball field or the monster contract he signed with the Texas Rangers. But on Monday, the Korean slugger was named the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games Goodwill Ambassador. Now, at the Korea press conference on Monday, the 32-year-old Texas Ranger was honored as the Goodwill Ambassador, as he hopes to spread knowledge about Korea throughout the world. He stated that when he first went over to the U.S., very little people knew about Korea as a nation, and that he's honored to be given the title and the responsibility. Chu, who signed a 7-year, $130 million deal this offseason, added that all children should be given the opportunity to play baseball and will do all he can to help youth baseball. And moving on, if Psy and Crayon Pop swept the world in the entertainment world in 2013, First Pitches in the KBO received its share of popularity on the internet as well. And turns out something that didn't even happen in the major leagues was voted as the most popular video clip on MLB.com.
Now, the so-called best first pitch you'll ever see, or the 360 back illusion first pitch by rhythmic gymnast Shinsoo was voted as the most popular video clip of 2013 on MLB's Cut 4. And while the first pitch took place when the Tucson Bears played the Samsung Lions last season, it was one of the most watched video clips in the U.S. And making the list as well was Eoh Jin dancing to Psy's Gangnam Style inside the Dodgers locker room. And moving on, after 7 years and 141 goals later, Dejan Damjanovic said goodbye to his fans and Korea at a press conference earlier on Monday. At the Seoul World Club Stadium, the Montenegrin international said goodbye after 7 years in the K-League Classic. After joining the Incheon United back in 2007 and playing for FC Seoul for the next 6 years, Dejan was the top scorer for 3 straight seasons with 7 seasons of double-digit scoring as well. Known as one of the most popular players in the league, Dejan stated that he considers himself Korean and will never forget his years in the nation as he's set to play for Jiangsu Sainty in the Chinese Super League next season. And now finishing things off in the V-League, the results are out for the 2013-2014 V-League All-Star voting, and in first place, Yeoh Jin and Yang Hyo-jin. With the voting taking place from January 16th to December 16th to January 2nd, Hyundai Capital Skywalker's libero Yeoh Jin received 18,912 votes as he received the most votes for the 3rd time in his career, while Hyundai Hill State center Yang Hyo-jin received the most votes in the Women's League after getting 23,895 votes. Meanwhile, the V-League All-Star Game will take place on the January 19th in Suwon. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good Tuesday morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. Well, relatively mild winter weather will continue today as morning lows in Seoul will start out at -2, which is about 2 degrees higher than yesterday. And afternoon highs will be also similar to a tad warmer compared to yesterday in most regions. And we'll start out the morning under partly sunny skies, then it will turn to cloudy later on. And it looks like the level of fine dust particles will be rather high in the capital area as we go through the day. So if possible, try to avoid being outside for too long later in the afternoon, and be sure to wear a face mask if you have to make a trip if you're in the Seoul metro area. Now, the weather outlook for the rest of the week is looking cold. Tomorrow we expect to receive mix of rain and snow in the entire nation, and after they all clear out, we'll have to gear up for a freezing condition. Morning lows in Seoul on Thursday will fall to -9, and afternoon highs will only get up to -4. So we have to be prepared for winter temperatures again. But not today, it's going to be mild, so let's take a closer look at those readings. The afternoon high in Seoul will peak at 6, while Daegu and Gwangju will get up to 9, and Busan will see an afternoon high of 12 later in the day. Now, for other regions, it looks like people in Jeju will have mild afternoon, reaching to 13. Daejeon and Dokdo will reach at 8 and 7, but the top temperature in Kumgangsan Mountain will be at -3. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me at this hour. Enjoy your morning commute and hope you have a wonderful day.
And that does it for this Tuesday edition of Daybreak. Thank you for watching.